Hey there. Tonight we're stepping into shadows, not fairy tales, not grand castles, but the cold, crumbling alleys where history held its breath and death wore a beak. You're not a hero, not really. Just a name scribbled on a ledger in 1656. The city needs a plague doctor, and somehow they picked you. Maybe someone confused you with a real physician. Maybe you were the only one desperate or foolish enough to say yes. Either way, congratulations. You've just inherited the worst job in Europe. Your welcome gift, a pouch of coins pressed into your palm with grim politeness. Payment up front. No handshake. No celebration. Just a quiet understanding that you likely won't live long enough to collect a second wage. It's generous in that strange way. People are generous when they know you won't be around to spend it. So, you've been chosen. That's the word they use. Chosen to serve in a time of need. A nicer way of saying you'll be surrounded by the dead before the week is out. You don't even get training. There's no mentor to guide you. No scroll, no pamphlet. But there is the outfit. First, thick leather breeches that reek of vinegar and old meat. You pull them on, trying not to gag. Then a long cloak soaked in oil until it's stiff and slick as a drowned crow's wing. This is your armor. It repels water, or more importantly, disease, or so they say. Gloves over your hands. A wide-brimmed leather hat to make you look official. And then, the mask. The infamous beaked mask. You slide it on. Straps tighten around your skull. Glass eyepieces fog up with every breath. You can't see well. You can't scratch your nose. But inside the beak, it's packed with crushed herbs, spices, flower petals, rose, clove, maybe a little mint if you're lucky, or powdered viper flesh if you're not. The air inside smells faintly sweet, disturbingly so. You're told these scents protect you from the miasma, the bad air that's said to carry the disease. You become a walking sachet, a bizarre potpourri of medical hope and desperation. And of course, they hand you a cane. You weren't expecting a cane, but here it is. Wooden smooth, oddly elegant. You're told it's multi-purpose. You can use it to poke at patients from a distance, pull back sheets, tap a foot, prod a lump. And if things get bad, really bad, you can swing it, not for the disease, but for the living. Because once you're out there, mask and all, you're more than a healer. You're a symbol, and symbols make great targets. You step outside for the first time, cloaked in your new skin. The streets greet you with silence. Shutters are closed. The occasional bell tolls in the distance, not for mass, but for death. A grim count. Cart tracks line the mud, still damp from the morning's rounds. The death carts came early today, piled with sheets, limbs half-covered faces. Some looked asleep. Most didn't. You reach your first home. A servant meets you at the door, face covered with a cloth. He doesn't speak, just gestures to the back. You smell it before you even open the door. Rot and fever. You steady yourself and go in. There she is, pale, still, a swelling under her jaw, angry and red. You don't need to guess. It's a bubo, classic sign. You prod it gently with your cane. Pus seeps out yellow and thin. You nod not because it means anything, but because people expect you to do something. Her husband stands nearby, hopeful, hollow-eyed. You mumble about humors. Recommend burning rosemary. Maybe keep a sliced onion near the bed. He thanks you like you just gave him a miracle. You didn't, but illusions are all you have to give. You write it down. Not her name. Just initials. No room for names anymore. Names make it real. Names make it personal. On your way out, you pass a child in the hallway. Quiet. Staring. You don't stop. You don't speak. There's nothing to say. More houses follow. Some with crosses scrawled on the doors. Some wide open, filled with grief. People clutching dead loved ones, begging for help. You offer herbs, words, a touch of false comfort. They want to believe. You let them. Midday brings an encounter in an alley. A man grabs you, coughing, hard eyes wild. You feel panic before anything else. You raise the stick, just enough to make him let go. He does, apologizes, begs. His wife is sick. You follow. She won't last the night. You give him rosemary. Tell him to burn everything. Say a prayer. You leave. By sunset, you've been to 12 homes. You're soaked in sweat. Your mask chafes your face. Your eyes sting from the herbs. The cloak sticks to your legs with every step. You head home, if you can call it that. A room above an abandoned bakery. The windows are shuttered. The fire is low. You remove the gear piece by piece. Hang it by the hearth. Let the smoke dry the moisture from the day. You scrub your hands 3 times. Your arms, your neck. You check for lumps. None yet. You whisper a thank you. To who you're not sure. You sit at the desk, open your notebook. Ink blurs as you try to make sense of the day. The symptoms, the patterns, the hopeless repetition. You eat bread, sip watered wine. The quiet is oppressive. Outside, someone screams. Then silence. You say a prayer. Not because you believe, but because it's something to do. A ritual. A tether. You think of the woman, her husband, the child in the hall. Then you stop thinking. You have to. Tomorrow, you'll wear the mask again, and you'll walk into the plague once more. The dawn comes gray and reluctant, leaking through the cracks in your shutters like an apology. It doesn't bring comfort, only the cold reality of another day. You rise slowly, joints, stiff body, sore. Every movement reminds you of the weight you carry, not just in the gear, but in your bones. The mask hangs from its hook by the fire, staring at you with hollow glass eyes. You try not to meet its gaze. It's become something more than a tool now. It's a presence, watching, waiting. You dress in silence, layer by layer. Breeches, first still damp at the cuffs. The cloak goes over your shoulders, cold and stiff with yesterday's sweat. The gloves, next snug and cracked. The hat sits low over your brow. And finally, the mask. You strap it on slowly. The crushed herbs inside are starting to turn sour. Rose petals mixed with mold. You breathe through it anyway. You've forgotten what the world smells like without it. Outside, the streets are ghostly. Market stalls sit empty canvas sagging with mildew. A barrel of apples has burst in the gutter, the fruit black and weeping worms curling through the pulp. Church bells toll again. You've stopped counting. Every ring is a death, and every death is a sentence that doesn't end. You pass the bakery, where the smell of bread once floated warm in the morning. Now, there's only rot and silence. The rats don't hide anymore. They watch you from the gutter, bold and unblinking. At the end of the block, a red X is smeared across a door. You tap your cane once, then enter. Inside, the air hits you hard, sickly sweet, like fermented breath and rotting linen. The patient is a merchant, once wealthy, judging by the tapestries on the walls and the fine rug underfoot. Now he lies on a cot motionless, except for the rise and fall of his chest. His skin is pale and blotched. A massive bubo has formed beneath his arm, dark and oozing. You step closer. He opens one eye. "Doctor," he rasps. "Is it?" You don't answer right away. You listen to his lungs rattling and wet. His pulse is quick but shallow. You nod slowly. "It's the plague," you say as gently as you can. He doesn't seem surprised, just closes his eyes. You place a cloth soaked in rosemary oil near his face. Set a pot of vinegar by the bed. "Burn juniper," you advise. "Pray, if you believe." He smiles faintly. "I shall." You step outside. The sun has risen, but it brings no warmth. You glance at the red X and move on. Mid-morning finds you at the canal. A small group of workers load bodies onto barges. The water glitters uncaring. You stop and watch as one corpse wrapped in sailcloth is pushed overboard. It floats briefly, pale face staring skyward, then vanishes beneath the dark water. "Honest work," one bargeman mutters. "Paid weekly." You nod. But you know better. You've seen 3 of them die in as many weeks. One by one, they vanish. The plague makes no bargains. From there you walk to the old monastery. It's been converted into a makeshift quarantine hall. The pews are gone. Cots line the nave. Smoke from smoldering rosemary curls toward the ceiling. A young novice greets you at the door, his hands trembling inside rough-spun gloves. He wears a half-mask and avoids your eyes. You begin your rounds. First, an old widow. Her hands grip the metal rail of her cot, knuckles white. She looks up and grins. "Well, she says I was hoping for a knight in shining armor." "You'll do." You chuckle beneath the mask. "I'm all sorts of armor, ma'am." Her laugh is rough, but genuine. You tap her swelling with your cane. It's hot firm. You prescribe broth and rest. She squeezes your glove like a lifeline. Next, a young laborer, barely breathing. His father stands nearby, prayer beads slipping through his fingers like sand. You write in your ledger mail, mid-20s, advanced stage, prognosis terminal. You move to a cot in the far corner. A boy, maybe 10. He lies, motionless, eyes open, but unfocused. You kneel beside him and whisper something, anything. He blinks once, then closes his eyes. You leave a mark in your ledger. A small X. Not his name. You didn't get it. Just a symbol. Outside in the courtyard, children play in silence. Orphans. A girl with matted hair hands you a flower, a wilted daisy. "Thank you," you say and mean it. She smiles, skips away stones, splashing into a cracked fountain full of green water and dead leaves. The weight in your chest grows heavier. You think of all the things you've seen. A blacksmith cursing the sky over his wife's grave. A young apothecary fainting at his first boil. A brother begging for a miracle that won't come. You've bled them, leached them, burned herbs, said prayers, written in your book until the ink bled like a wound, and still the numbers rise. By midday, you feel the cough begin. Dry at first, persistent. You don't panic, not yet. You tell yourself it's the dust, the smoke, the herbs, not the plague, not yet. You lean on your cane, take a breath, then another, and then you keep walking. A cluster of homes near the slaughterhouse is next. Even the air smells sick here, thick with blood and old meat. You enter one home. A man sits alone, his arm wrapped in bloodied cloth. "I tried bleeding myself," he mutters, "to drain the poison." You unwrap the bandage. The cut is deep. Red streaks crawl up his skin. You sigh, clean the wound. You're weakening yourself. Rest. Let nature fight. He grunts, doesn't argue. Next door, a boy limps to you. His leg is swollen, twisted. "Should be in the fields," he says, proud. "You will be, you lie." His mother smiles, desperate for hope. You don't correct her. Further down, an impromptu clinic. Two barbers argue over mercury versus bloodletting. You intercede, gently recommend elderflower tea. They scoff but listen. You write their names in your book, Matteo and Luca, not to thank them, to remember who to trust or avoid. The shadows stretch long across the road. You make one last stop, a plague pit on the edge of town. A trench filled with the dead. No coffins, just cloth-wrapped bodies dropped like refuse. You catch a shoe as it slips from a small body. A child. You stare for a moment, then let it go. You lower your head, whisper a prayer, not because it helps, but because it's all that's left. You return home, long after dark, your legs dragging your breath shallow inside the beak. The alley outside your door is quiet, too quiet. Even the rats seem tired of scurrying. You fumble with the latch, open the door, and step inside. The air in your quarters is stale, but familiar. The remnants of last night's fire sit in a dull glow in the hearth. You peel off your mask, slowly, careful not to tear the straps again. Your face is raw, where the leather rubbed red marks etched across your cheeks like war paint. You hang the mask on its hook. It looks back at you, hollow-eyed, mouthless, waiting. You sit beside it and stare. You've worn that mask for weeks, maybe months. It's hard to tell anymore. You've eaten in it, spoken through it, wept behind it. Sometimes you forget it's even there until a child screams, or a dog growls, or someone spits at your feet. You look like death itself, cloaked in black, your face that of a bird or a demon, or both. And that's the point, isn't it? The mask doesn't offer comfort. It offers truth. You're not here to heal. You're here because everyone else is gone. What's strange is how new the mask really is. People talk about it like it's some ancient relic, as if every doctor during the Black Death wore one. But that's not true. This mask, this design, is barely older than your career. Back in the 14th century, the doctors didn't wear beaks. They tied cloth around their mouths, carried pomanders, metal balls filled with herbs they could sniff when the stench got too thick. Disease was still a mystery then. Bad smells, bad air. God's punishment, those were the explanations. And in a way, nothing has changed. The beak was the idea of a French doctor, Charles Delorme. He figured if herbs were good to smell, why not wear them like armor? So he built this monstrosity, a mask with a half-foot-long nose, stuffed with spices and vinegar-soaked cloth. 2 glass holes for eyes, breathing vents beneath. A portable fortress for the face. It's absurd, and yet it might work. Not for the reasons they think. The herbs don't ward off evil spirits. The vinegar doesn't purify sin. But the layers of fabric, the sealed coat, the gloves, the beak, they keep you at a distance. From the people. From the blood. From the fleas. And maybe, just maybe, from the plague. You're a walking contradiction. Mocked by barbers. Feared by children. Sometimes mistaken for a demon. But still, they call you when they need someone to step into the dying room. You remember a barber once called your gear a crow costume. Said his saw was more honest than your herbs. Bet he could drain a bubo faster than you could sniff it. 3 days later, he was dead. His apprentice took over the shop. Never laughed at your mask again. The streets are filled with rumors. One man told you your mask was cursed, that its shape drew death closer like a talisman. Another said you were a sorcerer, keeping the plague inside the beak and letting it loose with every breath. Some pray when they see you. Others spit. You've had people follow you home, whispering behind you, hissing insults, holding their noses, as if the stink of the dying clings to your boots. Maybe it does. You understand why the mask unsettles them. There's no emotion in it. No voice, no warmth. Just a blank face and 2 lifeless eyes. When you speak, Your voice comes out muffled hollow, like a ghost whispering from behind a door. Sometimes you wonder if you should try to look more human. Smile. Speak softly, offer hope. But what would be the point? Hope is a lie when death stands at the door, and yet they still want you, need you, even as they call you a monster. You remember a girl once small, maybe 8 years old. Her mother was already gone, lying still on the bed, behind a closed door. The girl didn't cry. She just looked at you, tilted her head, and said, "Can I try on your mask?" You froze. She didn't want to play. She wasn't laughing. She just wanted to know what it felt like, to be the one who doesn't die. You let her hold it, just for a moment. She lifted it with both hands, but it was too heavy. She gave it back without a word. The next morning, her door had a black mark on it. There are days now when you don't remember your own face. You shave by feel. Avoid mirrors. Your skin is raw from the straps. The smell of the mask clings to your cheeks, herbs and sweat and leather and time. You wash the mask every night, but it never smells clean. It's become your second face. You wear it longer than your own, and you suspect that when this is over, if it ever ends, people will remember the mask more than the man inside. They'll speak of the crow-headed figure who walked the streets, who brought death or healing, depending on the story. They'll say you saved lives or ended them, that you were a healer or a demon. But the truth is far more simple. You're tired, you're coughing, you're afraid. You're not a symbol. You're not a myth. You're a man in a mask. And you're already wondering what happens when the herbs finally run out. Your morning starts the same way it always does now, with silence and dread. You sit at your small wooden table, light barely flickering from a half-burned candle, and stare into the open mouth of your medical kit. You treat it like some ancient oracle, as if it might whisper the secrets of life and death. It never does. Inside is a mess. A bronze lancet bent at the tip. A cloth pouch of dried leeches, most stiff with death, one twitching faintly. 2 glass bottles with cloudy streaks, what they once held, you no longer remember. A tin of thick herbal paste that smells like sweat and smoke. And your favorite, a tiny wooden spoon. You don't know what it's for. You carry it anyway. These are your weapons against the plague. A bent needle, a tired parasite, unlabeled potions, and hope. You take inventory, like it matters. 1 jar of vinegar, a chunk of lard mixed with camphor and crushed petals, a wax scroll of remedies written in Latin, so mangled that even the town priest gave up halfway through. You sigh. Time to go. Your first patient today is a cooper was. He's not making barrels anymore. His wife opens the door, hands trembling. She begs you to bleed him, says he's full of poison. She whispers it like a confession. Inside, he lies on a wooden bench, shirtless. His chest rises and falls in uneven jerks. A massive bubo blooms under his arm, glistening like a rotten fruit. He moans when he sees you. You don't ask permission. You hold up the lancet. He stares at it like it might save him. You know better. You press the blade to his skin. It punctures with a wet hiss. Blood pours thick, dark, almost black. He screams, convulses, then goes still. His wife rushes to him. He's sleeping, she says. You don't answer. You clean your blade, wrap it in cloth, and move on. Bloodletting. The ancient solution to all of life's ills. Galen believed in it. Hippocrates, too. A balanced body, they said, required balanced humors. Drain the bad blood, and health would return. It works on parchment. But in practice, you've bled dozens. Most end up in the trench anyway. Maybe you helped. Maybe you didn't. Sometimes you wonder if it gives them something to believe in one last fight before the end. Your next house smells like onions. A mother has wrapped her daughter's neck in slices. She swears it'll draw the sickness out. You nod. Why not? You help her crush another bulb, smear it on cloth, and bind the child's throat. The girl gags. You do too. The stink is overwhelming. Next, you try cupping. A little fire inside a glass jar. Press it to the girl's back. The suction raises a welt, meant to pull out the fever, or the spirits, or something. It doesn't help, but it leaves a mark. At least they feel like something's being done. The girl cries softly as you pack up your things. She knows what your silence means. Her mother just wrings her hands and thanks you with desperate hope. You leave them both behind. There's a barber surgeon across town who prefers cauterization. Last time you saw him, he pressed a glowing iron poker into a patient's bubo. The man howled like a beast. The smell of burning flesh lingered in the room for hours. The patient died that night. The barber called it progress. At least we learned something, he said. You nodded then. You wouldn't do it again. You stop by the apothecary. Doors look A sign hangs in the window. No new medicines. No old ones, either. Fair enough. You remember when his shelves used to brim with jars, dried frogs, powdered pearls, tinctures of ash and lavender. Expensive nonsense. Mostly bought by people who are now long dead. Now the survivors drink boiled mint and pretend it's magic. You're running out too. No wormwood, no poppy syrup. Even camphor makes you dizzy. And you can't afford to be dizzy. You recall one bizarre recipe from a moldy old manual. Crushed emerald and milk for pustules. Another suggested rubbing lard and rose petals into the armpits. You tried that once. The patient died, but smelled lovely. Your cane taps rhythmically as you walk past shuttered houses. You hear coughing from within one. Not plague, maybe. Not yet. You keep walking. You reach the granary, now a pest house. Inside, the sick lie on piles of straw. The air is thick with damp and decay. Groans echo off the stone walls. You kneel beside a boy, no more than 12. His lips are cracked. His chest barely rises. You offer him water with a drop of elderflower extract. He blinks once. The water spills from his chin. He doesn't respond. You wipe his mouth gently. In your ledger, you mark an X. Not for his name. Just the place. You stand bones aching. A man waves you over. My wife, he pleads. You follow him to a back room. She's bundled in blankets, breathing shallow. He begs you to try the leeches. You hesitate. You haven't used them in weeks. Most are dead. You open the pouch. Miraculously, one squirms. You press it to her wrist. It latches on, starts to feed. The husband stares in awe. Is that good? You nod. It's doing something. That's enough. The sun is setting when you step outside. The sky is purple bruised and tired. You rest on a bench, examining your hands. They reek of vinegar, blood, onion, fear. You used to write on your gloves to stay sharp. Notes, symptoms, signs. Now they're blank. What's the point? Every patient is the same. Every result inevitable. You remember a joke someone told months ago. The plague doctor's tools. A stick, a knife, and a prayer. You laughed then. Now, it's your inventory list. You finally make your way home. The streets are a blur. Just wood and stone and sorrow. You try not to look in windows. Try not to meet the eyes that wait for you. They want miracles. You have none left. You enter your room, unbuckle your gear, and lay your tools on the table. The lancet, the spoon, the empty bottles, the twitching leech in its jar. You sit and stare. It's all theater. Every herb, every poultice, every slice of your blade. It's a desperate attempt to make meaning from madness. These aren't tools. They're props in a tragedy, and you're the actor doomed to repeat the same lines until the curtain finally falls. You write in your journal, Bloodletting no result. Onion no result. Cupping mild blistering. Leeches inconclusive. Vinegar psychological effect only. Prognosis for all poor. You pause. Ink pools on the page. You light a candle, not for light, but for comfort. The mask hangs on the hook beside you. You almost ask it a question. Almost. Instead, you whisper the one truth you've come to accept. We did all we could. And then, in the silence that follows, we have no idea what we're doing. The trouble with being a plague doctor isn't just the death. It's what follows after. The eyes that no longer see you as a helper, but as a herald. The silence that greets you, where once there were hopeful questions. The weight that doesn't just live in your legs or shoulders, but in how people look at you. You were once seen as brave, appointed with some ceremony, if you can call a grim nod and a purse of silver a ceremony. You were the man who would protect us. They said it with strained smiles and nervous hands backing away even as they handed you the tools of your doom. But that's changed now. Now, when you walk into a home, people don't whisper prayers for healing. They whisper curses, not loud enough for you to hear the words, but you hear the tone. You feel the sting in every glance. You're no longer a doctor. You're a walking omen. They don't see your exhaustion, your trembling hands, the way your body is giving out beneath the cloak. They see the mask, the dark robe, the cane that taps the floor like a funeral drum, and they think death follows him. They're not wrong. You've been in more infected homes than you can count. Your gloves have brushed countless bodies. Your cloak has brushed against walls, doors, bedposts, slick with fevered sweat. If the plague clings to fabric, if it hangs in the air, then yes, you probably carry it. But the truth doesn't matter anymore. The baker no longer opens his shutters when you pass. The innkeeper, who once gave you broth on cold nights, now crosses the street. The priest no longer mentions your name during prayers. Then come the accusations. A widow corners you near the chapel ruins, screams that her husband was fine until your visit, that you cursed him, that your herbs were poison. A child throws a rock. It misses. Still, he runs before you can speak. A man in the square swears he saw you spit into the town well. You try to explain through your mask, your voice muffled and ghost-like, that it's not true, that you've done nothing but follow what little guidance you were ever given. But fear doesn't want explanations. It wants a target. Soon you stop walking alone. Guards begin accompanying you. Not as protectors, not really. More like watchers, like wardens. They walk behind you silently, hands on hilts, masks tied loosely around their faces. They fear the plague, yes. But more than that, they fear being seen with you. You are not a doctor anymore. You are a threat. You hear stories from other towns of plague doctors chased away, one beaten to death outside a chapel, another drowned in a well. Some may have been frauds, pretenders, but most just unlucky. You meet one of them one morning. On the outskirts, his robes are torn, his mask cracked down the center. He says he's been sleeping in barns moving only at night. They think I killed their mayor, he mutters, chewing stale bread. Told them he had no humors left to balance. Didn't help. You sit with him a moment, share a hard biscuit. Neither of you expects to meet again. Back in town, you're summoned to speak with the mayor. Still alive. Still clinging to power like it's the only thing keeping his heart beating. You enter the hall. It smells of incense and ink. He looks at you over steepled fingers. The people are frightened, he says. They want to know the plague is under control. You nod. They want reassurance. You offer what little comfort you can. Cases are steady. Isolation is working. The rosemary we've burned lately seems stronger. It's a lie, but a soft one. One meant to calm. He nods satisfied. Not with the truth, just with the performance. He hands you a paper. A public notice, he says. Posted in the square. Let them know we're containing the outbreak. You do as asked. That evening, the parchment is nailed to the post in the center of town. By morning, someone has drawn a skull over your name. You say nothing, but something breaks quietly inside you. There's a man in the poor quarter now, a former merchant turned preacher who walks house to house, spreading poison with his words. He says the plague didn't return until you did. Says your cane carries death. Says your mask is a demon's face. He has followers. People afraid, desperate, angry. They believe him. Not because he's right, but because he gives them something to fight. Fear wants a villain, and you in your bird-like mask and robe soaked in vinegar and sweat are perfect for the part. You start walking only at dusk. Less chance of a crowd. Less risk of an ambush. Your movements become smaller, quieter. You enter homes only when asked. Leave before the candles burn low. Speak little. Work fast. Avoid eye contact. Some people bar their doors. Leave signs. No entry, doctor. They'd rather die alone than see you in their doorway. You understand. You add their names to your ledger anyway. Marked not with certainty, but a kind of resignation. One night, you return home to find a message scrawled on your door. Go back to the pit you came from. Another reads, your mask hides your guilt. You burn them both. You've learned that medicine can't protect you, that herbs can't shield you. That truth doesn't matter when people are afraid. You speak less. You write more. You stop correcting lies. You stop explaining your methods. You just keep going, house to house, note to note, patient to patient. But you're not a doctor now. You're a shadow, a necessary evil. And with each step, you feel it growing heavier. The plague doesn't only kill with fever. Sometimes it kills with blame. And you're running out of ways to survive both. At first, the rats were just background noise. You saw them, sometimes darting along the gutters or skittering between piles of refuse. A nuisance, sure, but hardly a threat. They were simply another part of the decay, just like the broken shutters and the collapsed stalls and the black marks on the doors. But then they started to change. Not in shape or size, but in boldness. You step out one morning, cloak already heavy on your shoulders, and there's a rat sitting on your doorstep. Not fleeing, not twitching nervously, just grooming itself casually, like your presence means nothing. You wave your cane at it. It doesn't flinch. It strolls off like a nobleman, leaving an unpleasant conversation. That's the moment you begin to notice them in earnest. You see them climbing over plague carts, sniffing at exposed flesh. You spot one slipping between the floorboards of the church, dragging something pink and wet behind it. You tell yourself it's a rag. You don't believe it. At night, when the wind dies and the city sleeps, you hear them. In the rafters, in the walls, under your bed. They move in small armies, scraping and squealing and waiting. Always waiting. But still, no one blames the rats. The priest blames sin. The mayor blames trade and travelers. The barber blames the stars. And the people, they still blame you. You start to wonder if the rats have always been here. If they were part of the plague all along. Not just opportunists feasting on the fallen, but couriers. Vessels. A spice merchant told you once in a whisper that he'd read about fleas. Fleas on rats. Carrying sickness. The idea was laughed out of the tavern, but it stayed in your mind like a splinter, so you start watching. Where the rats are thickest, the plague is worst. Behind the grain house rats by the dozen. 4 families dead. Along Fishmonger's Row, rat droppings in every alley. 2 homes empty. Coincidence, maybe. But then again, nothing feels accidental anymore. One morning, you're called to a weaver's home. The building is half collapsed, a hole in the wall, large enough for a man or an army of rats. You knock. No one answers. You push the door open with your cane. The woman lies on a cot near the hearth, neck, swollen eyes glassy. But your eyes drift behind her. A mound of rags in the corner twitches. You step closer. A rat darts out, then another, then another. One has chewed through the woman's stocking. You finish your exam quickly. Leave a sprig of rosemary. Tell her to burn her linens. She won't. No one ever does. Outside, you ask the neighbor if anyone's laid traps. She shrugs. There's always more. She's right. They swarm now, bold enough to run in daylight, brave enough to climb the walls. One evening, you see them swimming across the canal. 5 of them tails slicing the water. You think maybe you're hallucinating. You're not. They're adapting. You start stomping your boots louder, thumping your cane against the ground, not to ward off spirits, but to startle the rats. It barely works. You visit the pest house in the West Quarter. A boy lies in bed crying. His leg is covered in bite marks. His mother swears it happened while he slept. You believe her. You've started stuffing cloth under your own door, patching cracks in the walls with wax and rags. You've lit fires, burned sage. Still every night you hear them. They gnaw at the wood, scurry under your floor, scratch behind your cupboard. One morning, you wake to find droppings near your medical kit. You vomit into the hearth, then you scrub the tools. Again and again. That night you dream of them. In your sleep, the rats speak. They wear tiny masks. Their claws tap your table. One lifts your cane and mocks your voice. Doctor, it says we've come to help. You don't tell anyone. You've heard whispers from other towns. They're using poison now. Ground glass and ash mixed with lard. You try it, carefully. You leave the mixture behind the ruined bakery where the rats cluster. 2 days later, the lard is gone. The rats are still there. You come home one evening to find your bedding shredded. A rat has built a nest inside it. You don't scream. You don't curse. You sit on the floor and stare. Eventually, you sweep it clean. Repack the bed. Sleep with your cane across your chest. You start marking rat sightings in your ledger. Not formally. Just a tiny slash here, a dot there. You stop recording patient names. There are too many. You start recording nests. The granary, the tannery, the old stable, the chapel's vault. It becomes an obsession. Not because you think you can stop them, but because you want to believe that someone someday will read your notes, that they'll see what you saw, that they'll know where to begin burning when the time comes. But part of you knows the truth. The rats will still be here long after the bells stop ringing. They are not a symptom. They are not a side effect. They are the inheritors. This city belongs to them now. You're just passing through. And as you walk the alleys at dusk, cane in hand, mask pressing against your face, you finally understand. You were never fighting the plague. You were just buying time. And the rats always knew it. When you first put on the robe, the gloves, the mask, you thought you were stepping into a role of purpose. A healer, a protector, maybe even a savior. You believed in some quiet, cautious part of yourself that what you were doing mattered, that your hands, even trembling, could hold back the tide of death, that your presence could offer hope in the dark. But that illusion didn't last long, because no one hired you to save lives. They hired you to die. They didn't say it out loud, of course. They used words like duty and honor and service. They handed you your payment in advance, not out of kindness, but practicality. They didn't expect you to make it through the month. You were a shield, not a sword. A barrier between the city and the grave. And shields break. Many doctors fled when the plague returned. Some left quietly. Others vanished overnight. The few who stayed locked their doors and let the city rot. But you stepped forward. Maybe because you had nowhere else to go. Maybe because you thought you could make a difference. Maybe because you didn't know better. Either way, you became the face of the plague, or at least the mask of it. Each day, you donned your uniform, thick with wax and fear. You stepped out into the same streets that emptied at your approach. You carried your case filled with leeches and tinctures and fragments of ancient knowledge passed down by men who never faced this horror. Bloodletting, cupping, vinegar baths, onion poultices, the cures of the learned. And still, the bodies piled higher. You watched people waste away no matter what you did. You recorded names, then initials, then just marks. You stopped remembering faces. It was easier that way. Some promised land and wealth and titles to those who survived the plague in their service. But you learned quickly that those promises were meant for the next man, not you. You wouldn't live long enough to claim them. You heard of other plague doctors, strangers sent from distant towns, sometimes young men just out of university. Some lasted a week. Some didn't make it to sundown. One died his first night in a stranger's attic, mistaken for a thief, and stabbed before he could even open his bag. Some tried to run. The city didn't let them. The plague didn't either. Even your own body started turning against you. The cough that started as a whisper in your lungs began to grow. Fever followed. Chills that no fire could break. You told yourself it was just fatigue. You still tell yourself that. Politics poisoned the air as surely as disease. The mayor wanted reassurance, not truth. The clergy wanted repentance, not medicine. Everyone wanted someone to blame, and there you were, the perfect target. They couldn't curse the sky, so they cursed the man in the mask. They couldn't punch the pestilence, so they punched you once hard enough to bruise your ribs. You remember that mob, the crowd that gathered as you left a quarantined house, the stones that flew, the hands that grabbed. The guards came, pulled you away, said it was for your protection. But you saw the way they looked at you, not like a man, like something between necessary and cursed. So you stopped speaking unless spoken to. You bowed your head lower. You wrapped your cloak tighter. You stopped asking for kindness. You became a shadow, and yet you kept going, day after day. Because someone had to. Because if not you, then who? There were moments when you wanted to run, to tear off the mask and flee into the woods and forget the city entirely. But you didn't. You stayed because there was still one more child with a fever, one more husband clutching his wife's hand, one more candle to light in a house gone dark. You stayed because you couldn't leave them, and because there was nowhere left to go. Your colleagues began to fall, one by one. The apothecary with the trembling hands, the barber who mocked your mask, the novice who whispered prayers over every wound, gone. Sometimes quickly, sometimes slowly, sometimes screaming. You stopped asking why. You focused on your ledger, your steps, the rituals that kept your mind from crumbling. You still washed your hands 3 times a day. You still scrubbed your tools. You still checked yourself for buboes every night before sleep, even as your hands grew weak, even as your vision blurred, even as the dreams crept closer. Dreams of bodies rising, of rats speaking in Latin, of the city on fire. You didn't tell anyone. You wrote letters to your family, folded them carefully, left them beside your bed, sealed with wax and rosemary sprigs. You hoped someone would find them when the time came, because you knew it was coming. You just didn't know when. One day, as you're walking through the fishmonger's alley, you pass a man collapsed in the mud. You check him. No pulse. You start to move on. Then you see it. He's holding your name, scribbled on a slip of parchment. You stare at it for a long time. Then you burn it and keep walking. That night, you cough harder than before. The fire in your chest doesn't fade with wine. You lie on your cot, staring at the ceiling. The mask hangs beside you, unmoving, always watching. You whisper to it, "If I don't wake up, don't let them burn my journal." It doesn't answer. You sleep, and when you wake, the plague is still outside, and so are you. The days stretch blur and bleed into one another, indistinct and heavy. You don't count them anymore. You count bodies, and there are always more. The plague has become a procession, a ritual of grim repetition. You wake, you dress, you walk the streets like a specter. You carry your cane like a staff of mourning. You speak less and see more. And what you see now is not just death, but what comes after. You've become not only doctor and recorder, but undertaker, gravedigger, fire starter. You start your day by helping load the carts. Wooden wheels groan beneath the weight of wrapped forms. Some neat, others twisted, some swaddled in linens that once smelled of lavender, now reeking of rot and resignation. Others lie bare, their limbs curled or stiffened in awkward farewell. There is no ceremony, no song, just the creak of wheels and the hush of a city too tired to mourn. You used to write names. Now you write numbers. In the margins of your ledger, 17 today, 23 yesterday, 11 with signs of remission, 2 recovered. Maybe you say recovered the way some people say miracle. Quietly with suspicion, the smell of burning never leaves. The pest houses send you word burn. The beds burn the clothes, burn the bodies, if the ground's too frozen to dig. You've set fire to more homes than you can remember. Sometimes entire buildings crumbling under the weight of grief and disease are torched as a mercy. You watch the flames rise. Sometimes they bring warmth. Mostly, they bring silence. There is no crowd, no final words. Just a curl of black smoke that joins the rest until the entire sky looks bruised. You've stopped reacting to the stench. You've stopped reacting to most things. Fear has left your body like blood drained during bloodletting. All that remains is numbness, a hollow clarity. You still hear cries, but they no longer pierce you. What cuts now is the quiet, the empty windows, the shutters that never open, the alleyways where children used to play now still. You visit the chapel ruins sometimes. The roof collapsed weeks ago, its charred timbers fallen like broken ribs. A prayer book lies in the dirt pages stained by rain and ash. You found it open once, wind rustling the paper to reveal a half-burned passage. Deliver us from pestilence. You close the book gently and set it on a stone ledge. You don't believe the words anymore, but you still respect them. Sometimes you kneel at the steps and whisper names you can remember, most of them gone. Some buried, some burned, some never found. You return to your rounds. You carry your medical kit, not because you believe it contains answers, but because people still expect you to. It has become a kind of stage prop like the mask, a symbol of trying, of not giving up even when you already have. You visit homes where the doors hang open, hinges rusted by rain. Inside, you find what's left. A man curled in a chair, head slumped to his chest. A woman lying beside a cold hearth, one hand stretched towards something no longer there. You do what you can. You mark the door. You inform the cartmen. You write a note in the ledger. The entries are brief now. M, late 30s, alone, deceased. F to child, likely days dead. Cause, plague signs present. You don't cry. You don't panic. You just write. Sometimes you linger. You're not sure why. Maybe to bear witness. Maybe to make their passing feel less anonymous. But mostly you move quickly. One evening, just before dusk, you're called to the edge of town. A family of 6. 3 already gone. 2 children, barely breathing. A mother who opens the door. Her face streaked with ash from the fire, she started to keep them warm. You examine the children. Their skin is cool, lips dry, buboes just starting to rise. You kneel beside the boy. He's too tired to flinch. You give him water. You place a cloth with juniper oil beneath his chin. You whisper that he's strong. He blinks just once. The girl won't speak. Her eyes are wide and blank. You turn to the mother. She's staring at you like you're a ghost. Maybe you are. You hand her the last sprig of rosemary in your pouch. Tell her to burn it by the window. Tell her to pray. Not because it will help, but because you want to leave her with something. She asks you the one question they all ask. Will they live? And as always, you say the only thing you can. I don't know. You leave her in the fading light, a lone candle glowing in the window. As you walk away, you already know you'll mark the house tomorrow. Another red X, another number. You've started writing to no one in your journal. Not notes, not observations, but confessions. Today, I turned away a woman who begged for leeches. I only had one left and saved it for a child. Today, I saw a rat crawl into a dead man's mouth. I did nothing. Today, I wondered if anyone will remember me. Today, I wondered if I want them to. You still check yourself each night. Neck, armpits, groin, still no signs, but you've begun coughing again. You tell yourself it's the smoke. You tell yourself it's the cold. You tell yourself anything. And when you lie down, the mask beside you like a second skull, you whisper to the ceiling, "We're still here," even if no one hears you, even if you no longer believe it means anything, because that's what this has become, a war of attrition, and all you can do is endure. You've lost count of how many fires you've lit, clothes, bedding, tables, sometimes whole rooms. Sometimes the people themselves, wrapped in cloth, soaked in wine, stacked in trenches dug by exhausted hands. It's become a routine. You visit the house. You see the death. You mark the door. You walk away. And when there's time or space or someone brave enough to help you return with a torch, today is no different. You're called to a block near the old stone well, a cluster of homes all quiet. You knock on one door, get no answer. Push it open. Inside, it's cold, damp, and still. The fire in the hearth, long gone. You follow the smell. The bodies are in the bedroom, 3 of them. A father, a mother, a boy maybe 10. The boy's eyes are open. You close them. You mark the wall with charcoal. Not because someone will respond, but because it's what you've always done. Ritual matters even now. Outside, a few neighbors watch from behind cracked shutters. No one speaks. You nod once. They vanish into their homes. You return later that afternoon with oil and cloth. You set the fire quickly. There's no resistance. Just the whoosh of flame meeting dry air and silence. It spreads fast, eating the house from within, the heat driving you back to the street. You watch until the roof falls. And then you move on. You spend the rest of the day in motion. Not because you're needed everywhere, but because stopping feels like surrender. One house has a sick man who won't let you in. He shouts through the door, says your mask is cursed, says he'd rather take his chances with God. You leave a pouch of herbs at his doorstep. Another home has already burned. You didn't set that one. You wonder who did. By sunset, your ledger is heavier. You try not to read the entries too closely. You already know how most of them end. You head toward the edge of town. The pit. You haven't been here in days. The trench is deeper now, wider. The grave diggers work with vacant eyes, their movements mechanical. They don't speak to you, they just nod. They're covered in soot, sweat, and what you don't want to think about. You offer them vinegar for their hands. They don't take it. One of them says quietly, "There's a child in the next load." You look away. You leave before they throw her in. You return home long after the last bell rings. You hang your mask. Remove your gloves. Wash your hands until they bleed. You strip down to your linen shirt, sit by the fire, and open your ledger again. You flip back, searching not for a name, but for a moment. There it is. The first patient you lost. A woman in her 30s. You remember her face, her voice. She asked you to save her son. You never found out if he lived. You stare at the page, at the way you wrote her initials. Then you turn to the back of the ledger and write a single line. We tried. It feels hollow, but true. The city is quiet tonight. Too quiet. Even the rats seem to have retreated, perhaps sated by the day's offerings. You sit by the window and stare at the rooftops. There's smoke on the horizon. Another fire. Another home. Another memory reduced to ash. You think of what this place used to be. Laughter. Bells. Street music. Bread warm from ovens. Children running. Now, it's just the sound of fire and footsteps and final breaths. You close your eyes. You imagine what comes next. One day this will end? It has to. You've seen it before. Heard tales of plagues that burned hot and fast, then vanished. People survived. Towns rebuilt. Graves filled in. Life returned. Maybe this city will too. But it won't remember you. It will remember the fire, the black marks on the doors, the carts, the silence. Maybe that's enough. Maybe that's all anyone can hope for, to be part of the story, even if your name is forgotten. You stand, walk to the hook, hold the mask in your hands. It smells like death and herbs and you. You set it down gently beside the fire. Tonight you won't wear it, not because you're safe, but because you need one night without its weight. One night to remember who you were before the plague made you its witness. You lie down fully clothed, cloak folded beneath your head, hands across your chest. Outside, the fire crackles, and for the first time in weeks, you sleep without dreaming. The morning arrives slow and gray. No birdsong, no bells. Just the hush that settles over a city where even grief has grown quiet. You rise without ceremony. Every movement aches. Your shoulders scream. Your back cracks, and your hands feel like stone. The fire has died. The floor is cold. The ledger lies open beside you, ink dried mid-sentence. You don't finish the sentence. You dress methodically. One layer at a time. Undergarments, tunic, gloves, boots, the cloak. Everything worn so many times that your body has memorized the order. Then the mask. You hold it in both hands. For a moment, you hesitate. You consider not putting it on. Consider walking outside as yourself, face bare skin, warm eyes seen. But the world no longer knows that version of you. It knows the mask, so you tie the straps, adjust the beak, breathe in the familiar scent of crushed herbs, leather, and thyme. You are the plague doctor again, and there is work to do. The city greets you with the usual stillness, the cobbled streets damp with early mist, the shop windows shuttered, the alleyways lifeless. You tap your cane on the stone not to announce yourself, but to remind yourself you still exist. You stop by the square. There's a child sitting on the edge of the fountain, alone. You approach carefully. He watches you eyes wide, but not frightened. You nod. He doesn't speak. You offer him a small cloth pouch, dried fruit, nothing more. He takes it, without a word. You gesture toward the chapel ruins. He shakes his head. You don't ask why. You already know. Everyone's gone. You leave him there because there's no safer place. You move through the city like a ghost, visiting marked doors, crossing names in your ledger, checking for signs of breath, where there are usually none. You pass by the pest house. The door is open. Inside, the floors are clean, beds stripped and firewood stacked. The patients are gone, not cured, just gone. You check the ledger on the front table. No new entries. You sit for a moment, just to breathe. And that's when it happens. A sound, unfamiliar, distant, echoing. It's a bell, faint, slow, hesitant. You rise, heart pounding. You step outside, and you see them, people, peeking from windows, stepping out onto porches, quiet, cautious. Some coughing, some limping, but they are alive. They see you. They don't run. They don't spit. They stare. You raise your hand not in greeting, but in acknowledgement. The bell continues to ring. 1, 2, 3 times. And then it stops. You walk toward the city gates. The guards are gone. Beyond the walls, the road stretches into mist. Silent. Empty. You think about leaving. You could. No one would stop you. No one would blame you. You've done more than anyone ever asked. You've lived longer than anyone expected. But something keeps your boots rooted to the ground. You turn back. You walk into the city once more. The apothecary's door is open. Shelves empty, but swept. The baker's stall has a small loaf sitting unattended. The fountain flows again. You kneel beside it. Remove your gloves. Let the water wash over your fingers. It's cold, sharp, real. You dip your hands and cup the water and press it to the beak of your mask. The water trickles down the leather, a baptism of sorts. And then you stand. You return to your home, to the mask's hook, to the ledger's final page. You don't write numbers today. You write words. I saw them again. The living, the ones left, the ones who stayed. And for the first time, I believed we might not be the last. You close the book, step outside, and as the wind rises, the mask still on your face, you walk down the street, not as a shadow, but as a witness, as a keeper of fire, as the last plague doctor, still alive.